Alrighty folks, Brew.com here. My name is Adam Pudze and I'm bringing you another tag. This time it's Legacy format and it's Death and Taxes Mono White deck. Basically, you can call it somehow Mono White Maverick, because those two archetypes basically feature more or less the same cards. I did run it this weekend. I don't have a ton of experience with this deck, but enough, and I played it a lot against it and read and watched a lot about it. And the variations of this deck do differ drastically from each other. There is not a ton of space for innovation or some deck tuning or polishing. And you basically have like 3 to 5 cards which you can kind of switch from time to time depending on the metagame. But the core is pretty much out there. Let's start with the lands. So one of the reasons to play this deck to have access to 4 wastelands and 4 Rishadan ports. Of course, some number of basic planes in here, in this case 9. Which are complemented by other technically white sources like one Horizon Canopy, just to have that one extra draw sometimes out of the situations when you need to pull out back into the game. One of a Janjo Castle. I'm gonna be pretty terrible at pronouncing this name. But what this card does is just a legendary land that produces white, and for 1 white and a tap prevents 2 damage to some legendary creature. And in our case it's a 4 of the Thalia, Guardian of Raven. So it's mostly for those. It's kind of just better than an extra planes in this deck. It's only a 1-off, so it doesn't really disturb, and it's still a source of white mana in this deck. One of the Coven of Souls, you don't want to play more than 1, I think, in this deck, because you do need sometimes quite a bit of double white to cast your Scaravenges and Flicker Wisps and Crusaders. So yeah, the deck kind of wants a decent amount of colored mana. And then 3 of Caracas, so basically another disruption land. It's good against show and tell, I mean sneak and show deck, where they basically try to cheat into play like a bunch of giant monsters. It's even good against land stack, because you can bounce the Merit Blade token, because even though that token is 20/20 indestructible, but it's a legendary creature actually, so the actual token is legendary. So that set is a nice interaction, and then with Caracas you can balance opposing Vendilium Cliques and Vanzas and bounce your own Folium. And even a card which I actually don't play in this build because I don't think it's necessary in this deck. It's more of a win more card in my opinion. So Bremaskin of Verascos, which is a legendary creature, but I just don't like it in this deck because I wanted to play more of a hate bear style kind of deck, and not just some value creature deck. Though it is a creature deck, but it's more of a disruption and decent tempo type of deck. Alright. So our 1-drops, which are kind of the core of the, also part of the core of the deck, 4 of Aver Vials, a set of Mother Friends, a set of Swords to Plowshares, basically the best removal in the format. 4 of Thalia, Guardian of Raven. It does die a lot, so you want 4 of them, and it does get countered a lot, and you do really want to draw it, because this is one of the probably best cards in the whole deck. And then 3 of Phyrexian Revokers, I thought of playing 4, but then I realized that I don't want to play one of Primas in this deck, and I really wanted to play the Spirit of Labyrinth because it's so good against all the blue decks with Brainstorm and whatnot. So I cut one of the Revokers and cut Primas to put in Spirit of Labyrinth. And the Revoker is really awesome, like the fact that it can actually shut down mana sources is really awesome. Because this can kind of lock you up the game. And then our creature 2 drops 2 Spirit of Labyrinth, which I mentioned before. They are kind of pretty good, like I like them more than some just random value creatures in this deck. 3 of Sea Avengers, I don't want to play 4 because it kind of gets clunky when you draw multiples early on. And then of course the biggest driving force of this deck, 4 of Stoneforge Mystic. You can't play this deck without them, and you definitely want to play 4. That's for sure. It's just how you try to win the games against other creature decks. And the package for Mystic is just 1 of Batterskull, Umazel's Jide, and 1 of Sword of Fire and Ice, so that's the equipment suit in this deck. I definitely understand like Batterskull and Jeets, and the reason to play this particular sword is because you want to draw more action and you want to actually deal more damage, and you want to draw more gas. So, and Sword of Fire Ice does all of that. Plus there are a lot of blue decks in the format, and having protection for blue helps against opposing True Name Nemesis, which is a kind of a pain for this deck to deal with. Then the main, let's say, striking force for this deck are 3 of Mirren Crusader. Because of its double strike ability, if you put equipment on it, it becomes a really like build your own Terminator. And the Pro Black and Green is still relevant. I would prefer it to be probably like a at least Paladin and Deck ability Pro Black and Red, or ideally Pro Red and White, but it doesn't fit Color Pie. But that's probably those 2 protection colors which I would prefer the most for this kind of guy. But it's Pro Black and Pro Green because of storyline and flavor and being anti-Phyrexian or whatever. But yeah, I wanted to have protections from Bolts and from Swords to Plowshares mainly, because having it Pro Black and Green still matters against a lot of creatures from Bogdelverin, Shardless Bug, or Shardless Sultai, whatever. It has protections from Abrupt Decay, which is probably the most common main deck removal in Legacy, I suppose. And then 3 of Flicker Wisp. It could be 4 off, but it's really hard to find those slots for 4 off of anything in this deck, except for like really must-have spells. One really nice thing about it is that it is basically your only main deck answer against opposing Ensnaring Bridges, which is a really terrible card to face for this deck, and you really want to play carefully with it and not waste it on anything if you feel like you're playing against a deck which might have main or post sideboard some Ensnaring Bridges. It's just super annoying, and Flicker Wisp is most of the time your only chance to win. Right, moving on to sideboard, I want to start with 2 of Enlightened Tutor, 1 mana fetches an artifact or enchantment card on top of your deck, and that allows you having kind of a wish type of card package in your sideboard. So outside of 1 of Containment Priest and 2 of Council's Judgment, you can pretty much tutor for anything, from which any of the sideboard cards which you include in there. Containment Priest being excellent against all the Sneak and Show decks and Reanimator decks, and actually against Dredge, which I think is a kind of a tough matchup. It really depends on the draws and what your sideboard looks like. So, kinda lopsided. It's not absolutely terrible, but not one of the greatest matchups of this deck, that's for sure. And Council's Judgment, which just removes any permanents from playing, well, literally removes, exiles it. It's your answer to True Nemesis, also opposing Ensnaring Bridges, Chasers, which might be annoying sometimes. What else? It's also an answer to Counterbalance, Miracle, Blue-White, or Blue-White Splash something. Miracles decks is kind of a nightmare for this deck, I feel like. It's just, if they assemble Counterbalance plus Insane Divine on top, it's just Misery Town all the way, unless something miraculous happens on your side, actually. Right, and the tutor package contains 2 of Rest in Peace, all the graveyard dependent decks, 1 Gravdiggast Cage, 1 Python Needle, so just solid Assembly Hate Cut, as well as Everstone Canonist. So you have quite a few tools against combo decks, but game 1, it just feels like you're not on the same level or something like that, unless you draw Timely Thalia or Revoker to shut down one of the pieces or something like that, or Spirits of Labyrinth to kind of negate a deck like Elf, let's say, so to fizzle the Glimpse of Nature or something like that. Cataclysm, it's debatable whether it belongs to the sideboard of this deck, but it's one of your few ways to deal with some decks like Elves. It's just like you have to do that, and of course you have to pray that they don't natural tutor into Progenitors or Behemoth and just kill you on the spot, or just have Progenitors in play, because then you just cannot cast Cataclysm, you just lose, I think, on the spot. But yeah, it is good decks like Blue-Black Tezzerets, next to their boards. I feel like it wasn't really something I would bring in against Park stacks, that's for sure, because even if you just leave them with 1 lens, with 1 wreck in play, that means you're probably still gonna lose. 1 of Wretched Bomb helps against Dredge, helps against Elves, against Delver decks, anything which has like permanence for 0 or 1 mana cost. Yeah, well, you of course you have to be very careful with it because it nukes some of your things, so you really have to put a lot of thought when you cast it, unless it's some combo decks, in which case you can throw away some creatures if you feel like you can't win otherwise. Circle Protection Rat, of course, against Burn, primarily. Could be decent in other matchups, like Blue-Red Delver, Jeskai Delver, something like that. I probably wouldn't side it in against Jeskai Delver, probably just against Blue-Red Delver, Burn, or what else it could be. Hard to imagine, maybe Zoo, which I don't feel like is a legitimate deck in Legacy, but technically it's possible that you would face one during the tournament. and then one of Oblivion Ring, which is your tutable answer for anything annoying on the board. Basically the key card of your sideboard, because this deck does struggle against a lot of non-creature permanents. And then as for sideboarding, I do find out that against a lot of matchups I find myself taking up Mother Runes or taking on Source of Plowshares. So those two card names get out of my deck after sideboarding most often. Then what? You can probably cut maybe one off, like Flicker Whisper Cerevinger, and bring in more hate depending on the matchup. Probably never side out Mystics and the equipment package, I believe, because then you could have some hard time closing out the games. What else? Because you have a lot of sideboarding for all different kinds of combo decks, but I don't know. Of course you can tune this deck to fit almost any particular metagame, but I feel like this deck really shines best against non-metagame which would contain a lot of blue fair decks and non-miracles decks, because miracles matchups doesn't really feel that great. Really, a lot of the things have to go your way for you to have good games against that deck. Some options for the sideboard. Mangara Coranda used to be kind of a no-brainer for this Death and Taxes set deck or Maverick kind of deck. You'd probably see some play in Maverick still, but I don't think like it belongs to this deck. It's just so slow, and Legacy in the past years been kind of shifting but and becoming faster. That's just my impression. So options would be like adding 1 Brimaz or 2 Brimaz or something like that, adding the 4th Revoker to the deck. Then if you're really scared of all the Stoneforge Mystic kind of decks, so you want to deal with equipment so that your creatures actually stand for it and they don't get to race you or kill your guys, then you might play Riki Gusari, so that equipment which for tapping unattach or sacrifice, no, it's unattached, breaks an equipment. It's kind of a very niche card. I probably wouldn't play it in a white metagame, but if you kind of know your local store or the local metagame for big events, sure, go for it. Another card which you might consider against those kind of Stoneforge decks is the Tower of Magistrate. It's just a land which produces colorless mana, but for 1 and a tap, it makes creature having protection from merit effects until end of turn. So the equipment will just fall off, and you probably can just do it every turn. It's a land, so it doesn't really contradict with how you sideboard that much. You can just side out maybe like Horizon Canopy or something like that, and bring in that land. Yeah, it's so niche. Of course you can add like a 4th Flicker Wisp if you feel like you really need it in the metagame, that kind of fact, but I doubt that you would not most of the time need it. Then Absolute Law seems like a card which often would see play in the sideboard for this archetype, but I just don't feel like it. There is no Blue-Red Delver anymore, not that much as it used to be because of Cruise being banned. Of course there is still Dig, but the deck kinda lost its charm, I guess. so not that many bolts and fork bolts being cast around you. So Absolute Law doesn't feel that necessary anymore in the sideboard. And of course, like decks like Sneak and Show would have cards like Pyroclasm in the sideboard to try to clean the board against you. But I feel like it's already a fine matchup. Of course, like Pyroclasm could kill your Hate Bears and then they can get back into the game. But I just don't feel like it's worth it just to hedge against cards like Pyroclasm and opposing Lightning Balls. There are other bigger troubles for this kind of deck. Right, folks, that's the Team Boat Brew for you this time around. I hope you enjoyed it. Hope this was informative. Don't forget to subscribe and check the website. Support my project via donations. Link in the description below. I wish you all good luck. So I hope some of you may pick up this deck. It's actually quite decent. It just has to be the right quote for the right metagame, the right time. That's just my impression. Alrighty, until later. Goodbye.